Kia ora, tēnā tātou katoa. President, fellow Rotarians and guests, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Nigel Bickle. Nigel is the head of the Provincial Development Unit for MBIE, and his unit's responsible for the increased emphasis by the government on regional economic development. Nigel's been a public servant for 20 years, 8 of those years as Deputy Chief Executive of Immigration, the Department of Building and Housing, and also Department of Social Welfare. The majority of his experience is in frontline service delivery and a number of operational and support leadership roles, specifically within complex organisations undertaking change. In February, Nigel is taking up the role of the Chief Executive of the Hastings District Council. Nigel's originally from Porirua, and we welcome him here today to hear about the Provincial Fund. Thank you.
The provinces have hidden gems that haven't been discovered yet. Unless we evolve and develop, New Zealand will never reach its true potential.
People sometimes forget how much talent there really is in provincial New Zealand. People in regional towns feel like they've been forgotten a little bit, and all we want is a little bit of support and help from central government.
It's definitely been challenging trying to start a business in Northland. I felt a bit isolated and like there wasn't as much resources and help for me as there might be in a bigger city.
The cities have got their place in the world, but certainly the provinces are the places where most of the people in New Zealand would ideally like to live. And the only way we can do that is to make sure that the provinces grow, and as a result of that, the lifestyles of our children and the youth will just be amazing.
Sunny Hawke's Bay, who wouldn't love it? I grew up here, I'd love my kids to grow up here. I want to teach my kids that if you apply yourself to stuff, you are going to get achievements.
We've never seen a regional collaboration at this level, so it does present the opportunity for all of our collective will and minds to come together to solve some of the broad challenges.
The future is looking extremely bright for the provinces across New Zealand. The Provincial Growth Fund is really going to help those regions to unlock the potential that they've had sitting there waiting whilst we've had a focus on the major centres such as Auckland and Wellington, which are really restricted in their ability to grow.
The regions are the guts, the kidneys, the lungs of the whole country, and the cities are the brains, and just like in a body, we all need each other.
Forestry is a strong industry here in Northland, but at times there is not enough backing to help uplift and upskill the youth.
We tend to forget that we were once a very strong region, and we can be that again if people are given confidence.
I see with what's happening here on the coast in terms of technology as a key for our own, offering them opportunities to stay here and not leave to chase the big city lights.
Some of the opportunities for this province that have probably been lacking are really robust infrastructure that can help the resilience of the businesses that are here and also attract new businesses.
I'd love us to continue to grow the economy without sacrificing the things that make New Zealand in general fabulous. There's a lot of good people in the communities all around New Zealand that want to make a difference, they want to get out and help.
Kia ora, good afternoon, and thanks very much for having me along. I've got to just start by acknowledging the fantastic work that Rotary do at an individual and community level, both here in New Zealand and around the world, and thank you very much for your endeavours in that regard. Look, I appreciate the opportunity of talking with you briefly this afternoon about the Provincial Growth Fund. It's the propaganda, but as you'll kind of be aware, this was established with the formation of the coalition government and was a centrepiece of the coalition agreement between Labour and New Zealand First that allocated $3 billion over 3 years for this thing called the Provincial Growth Fund. I've been a public servant for 20 years, and it's not the first time a government's thought about regional economic development. It won't be the last time, but it's the first time in my experience as a public servant that there's $3 billion of money that's been put to that endeavour. And I was kind of reflecting on the way up here, thought about this bit over the course of being in this job. Norm Kirk once famously said, he said, he whao no tino hia, ko te aroa tuatahi, te tuarua, te whare mo te whānau, te tua toro he mahitahi, te tua whākia whai tūmanako te reanga. So in English he said, actually, you know, what's important for New Zealanders, and therefore New Zealand's not actually that complicated, and Kiwis don't actually ask for a lot. At its most basic level, they want someone to love, they want somewhere to live, they want somewhere to work, and they want something to aspire to for their family and community. And in reality, what the fund represents is an opportunity to make a difference for people and place, is at its heart what the fund's about. So $3 billion, the fund is organised into basically three main areas. One, some investment in helping to build the capacity and capability of people that aren't in education, employment and training, to invest in firms and sectors that will go to growing the regional economy, and to invest in enabling infrastructure. Some things to point out, it's a $3 billion fund, it's not a $3 billion grant fund. The reality is the instruments that are available to us are grants, debt and equity, and we're using all of those forms of investment. And we're doing this for some pretty clear objectives. We want to invest in regions. Now the government's basically said this is open to all provinces of New Zealand. There are 3 exceptions. None of the money's going into metropolitan Wellington, Auckland or Christchurch. It is for provincial New Zealand. They have prioritised 6 regions in particular: Northland, Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Tairāwhiti, Manawatu, Whanganui, and the west coast of the South Island and Hawke's Bay are the 6 priority regions for early investment. So the fund was launched on the 23rd of February this year. We have in 8 months committed just over $1 billion now of investment. $500 million of that's gone into the government's 1 Billion Trees program. But broadly, we're about $100 million worth of investments into Northland, about $55 million into the Bay of Plenty, $175 million into Gisborne, $80 million into Manawatu, Whanganui. Thursday this week, you'll see media coverage of the Prime Minister and other ministers on the west coast of the South Island, which is probably circa a couple of $100 million worth of investment. And Hawke's Bay is now a priority for us heading into the early part of 2019. From a governance point of view, the way this works is basically any investment over $20 million is decided by the full Cabinet. Anything between $1 and $20 million is delegated to 4 decision-making ministers, being Grant Robertson as the Minister of Finance, David Parker as the Minister of Economic Development, Phil Twyford as the Minister for Transport, and Shane Jones as the Minister of Regional Economic Development. Any deals up to $1 million, there's a small group of about 10 senior public servants that can have authority to sign off up to $1 million in terms of deals. The objectives of this that guide us are we're largely looking to invest in things that will lift the productivity of regions, create jobs, reduce the number of kids that basically aren't in education, employment and training, and things that will contribute to basically the country's climate change objectives. But the top of the food tree in terms of our priorities are about investment in things that will lift the productivity of our regional economies and create basically more and better paid sustainable jobs in the regions. So to give you a kind of sense of this, I'm believe it or not, I don't look that young, but I started my life in the public service in the 1990s before older public servants talked to me about the good old Development Finance Corporation that used to exist in the sort of 80s and some kind of war stories from that time. But what we are looking to do increasingly now is we're working with the banks, the Big Four, the private equity houses, looking to basically invest in commercial and sector propositions that go to the reasons that we're doing this. So the objectives is obviously we're not looking to crowd out private sector investment, we're actually looking to do the opposite, crowd it in. We are sort of taking risks, because if we didn't, and if the market just took care of things, there's no business for government. But we are looking to partner with the private sector where we can help either de-risk a project or bring forward investment that otherwise wouldn't happen. So maybe if I finish with a couple of examples, and then if there's time for questions. So we take one earlier in the year, Ruapehu Alpine Lifts. And Ruapehu, a project that's been around for a number of years, replacing the gondola on the mountain. Obviously a pretty strong feature of the region in terms of its tourism play. The opportunity to link up two World Heritage parks, turn what is a winter business into an all year round business. Proposition company came to us and said, look, it's a $30 million deal. We've partnered with the two local councils who've put $5 million in. We've got a third party commercial arrangement. We're putting $10 million in. We want $10 million. We said, well, we're not going to do it as a $10 million grant, but we're interested in this in terms of the projections around the jobs that it's going to create. It obviously plays to a regional strength around the tourism industry. And obviously what we could sort of see in terms of the benefits for New Zealand was we could de-risk some of this project whilst you're getting doing the construction, building your marketing, growing your tourism numbers, and structured it in a way where it's concessionary loan for a period, but at the point that you hit your tourism numbers, it's a straight out debt play where you'll pay them